Welcome to the Future of Wellness podcast, where we dive deep into the evolving landscape of health, technology, and human potential. And we're your hosts, Alexander
and Kasia. And in each episode, we will explore how cutting-edge innovations are shaping the way we live, work, and take care of ourselves.
From biohacking breakthroughs to the future of mental health and sustainable well-being, we'll be joined by visionary thinkers who are redefining wellness for the modern world.
Stay tuned as we uncover the trends and insights that will inspire you to thrive in the years ahead.
And now, over to the chat.
So Eddie, first of all, it's really nice to see you personally and welcoming you in our Future of Wellness podcast. And maybe you just start with a short intro about yourself, how you can describe yourself, your interest, what you do.
Okay, sure. My name is Eddie Stern. I'm a yoga instructor. I'm from New York City. I do a bunch of things that all sort of fall under the yoga umbrella. I'm really interested in science. I have a master's in science for yoga research, so I am involved in a lot of different types of research with yoga. As well, I have a couple of different apps that I've developed, both around breathing and actually another around yoga postures as well. I write books, and I published a magazine on philosophy for a long time that is now turned into a teacher training platform. And I'd say probably most importantly, over the past few years, I've developed a methodology of doing breathing practices and of doing postures based on a lot of years of scientific research and, over 3 decades of personal practice myself, to develop something that is very accessible, easy for people who are beginners to get into, and also is based on brain-body communication, nervous system function, endocrine system function, supporting immune system function, and everything is very intentionally sort of crafted for holistic outcomes. So that's probably the most interesting thing I think that I've been working on for the past couple of years is developing these kinds of practices. So and now training people how to teach them.
Yeah, sorry for interrupting you, but I think you have most interesting story about your personal development. We just read something about your personal story that you 10 years ago had some problems with your breathing system. Please just let me check.
I think it was actually 20 years ago when you had pneumonia twice. Am I right about that?
You are so right. Yeah, it was actually in 2004. I had pneumonia twice in a row, and my doctor sent me for some heart exams because he wondered what was causing that in an otherwise healthy-looking individual. And it turned out I had a couple of congenital heart defects, things that will require it probably at a certain point in my life, some heart valve replacements and stuff like that. And so, but I'm not a candidate, knock wood, for surgery yet, and I wasn't then. So far, I've gone 7 years past the time when he thought I would need surgery. So I'm not doing bad, and I hope to go a bunch more years past this time as well. And I started looking into different things that would be good for cardiovascular health because the practices that I had been doing, mainly Ashtanga yoga, weren't really doing anything to affect the tendency of my system to have high blood pressure and the tendency of my system to have a higher resting heart rate and all sorts of things like that. So I had to switch things up. And that led me to learning about resonance frequency breathing, which is sort of a biofeedback-based slow breathing practice that I was first discovered by 2 doctors from St. Petersburg when it was still called Leningrad. And they were working with cosmonauts and were finding that when EKGs were being sent back from the cosmonauts, which is pretty much the only transmission they could get about health parameters, that they could correlate it with certain times of the day when they were very productive in getting things done and really on point. And those correlated with these particular readings of their heart rate variability. So this started a lot of research into the effects of heart rate variability on cognition, on cardiovascular health, on relaxed states, et cetera, et cetera. So now heart rate variability was was known a lot earlier. With the cycle of it was discovered in earlier times, and even the signaling that heart rate variability is affecting, which is a feedback loop of blood pressure, how the heart signals to the area in the throat, which are measuring your blood pressure, the baroreceptors they're called. They signal to the brain, and the brain signals back down to the heart to keep your blood pressure at healthy levels, depending on your activity, what you're doing. And so this was discovered in the late 1800s, and this is called the cardiac cycle, basically, where your blood pressure is being monitored by a few different functions of the nervous system. And so when you breathe within the cardiac cycle, that means that you're breathing at the time it takes from the heart to signal to the baroreceptors to the brain and back down to the heart, which is roughly 10 seconds. So if you breathe in for 5 seconds and breathe out for 5 seconds, you're breathing in the cardiac cycle. And this can have really positive outcomes for cardiovascular health, for stimulating the branch of your nervous system, which is responsible for relaxation, for healing states, for calm states, etc. And so I was looking for calm states. I had some stress about, being a heart surgery candidate. And so these practices really started helping me. But more than helping me find calm states, I noticed that after a few weeks, I was sleeping better. My resting heart rate was coming down. A lot of things started changing from this really simple breathing intervention. So that led to the creation of my first app, actually. And also it led to some ideas that later, about a decade later, formulated into a book that I wrote, roughly, basically about yoga and the nervous system. So yeah, that was the story, more or less.
That's a lot.
Yeah. And so interesting.
Yeah, and you have mentioned a lot about breathing, but you're also teaching yoga. I mean, this is the main thing for you, which I can guess.
Ashtanga. Yep. Or not,
No, I
not
did
only
teach
Ashtanga.
Ashtanga yoga I taught it for 30 years. Oh, wait, can I say one other thing about the resonance breathing? This just kind of occurred to me. But from that initial diagnosis of what was going on with me, then later to the discovery of these breathing practices that then led to me meeting a guy from Belarus named Sergei Verichev, who was an app designer. I said, I have an idea for an app. He was an app coder, and he was at a workshop of mine. So we collaborated together, and we built the breathing app for basically nothing. And we put it out for free, and it's still free. And we've had like over 800,000 downloads of that app. And we have about, right now, anywhere between 25 to 50,000 people using the app every month, and about 5,000 to 8,000 unique downloads of the app every month. And so from this thing of like finding out something was kind of wrong with me, and then finding out here's this thing that helps me, and then making an app and putting it out there, you can kind of do positive things around health conditions if you get lucky. So I feel pretty good about what we did, and I don't mind having a congenital heart defect if it's allowed me, and Sergey and Max and our new partner Dilesh, if it's allowed us to help the lives of a lot of people at no cost. That's kind of like cool, and so that makes me happy.
It
So
is. I love the way how you talk about this. It's really sweet and considerate. But talking about yoga, I mean, you
yeah,
have said a lot about breathing, and that's a vital part of what you do, your research. But also, you do a lot of research in yoga, and sometimes the conclusions that you get from research can be different. And they're close. The proximity is really close for breathing and yoga, but I think there may be some different results for them. Can you elaborate a little bit more on yoga, and from researchers' points of view, what yoga does for you long term if you do it a lot?
right. So what does yoga do for you long term? It all depends on how you're doing the yoga. So if you do things in a moderate way, the right amount at the right times, and you pay attention to your energy levels, to your body, to your levels of fatigue or health or whatever it might be, then yoga can really help you in a lot of ways. So when we talk about yoga, we're talking about doing yoga postures. We're talking about breathing. We're talking about relaxation practices. Maybe we're talking about chanting practices. But we also have to consider the lifestyle things that go along with yoga. For example, the food that we eat is really important. And the way that we treat people around us is really important. And the way we treat ourselves, and a sense of either devotion or awe or gratitude to the unknown. These things are really important. And so without all of these things, yoga can simply be the doing of yoga postures. How good can that be? It can help you stretch your muscles. It can strengthen your bones, can balance the nervous system. It could potentially strengthen immune function. It could help you to feel relaxed and calm just through the stretching, maybe give you more energy, perhaps improve your sleep. All very positive things. Like, who wouldn't want those things? I want those things also. And so, but then when you add in breathing practices, you have this ability to start to shift your awareness from this outside world of, say, working with your body and seeing that if you're in the right pose, to what happens when air moves from the outside world into you. All of a sudden, this thing that wasn't you kind of becomes you and changes how you feel, how you think, how you're focused. And so what this is this is like a fulcrum, or in Sanskrit, it's called a tirtha, a crossing over place, where you enter from one dimension of consciousness or reality to another dimension of consciousness and reality. So right now, I'm outward consciousness. I'm seeing you guys. I'm talking to you guys. This is an apparent shifting reality that we are engaging in together. But when my awareness moves inward, now I'm taking that conscious awareness, and it's not shared anymore. It's internal. It's what's happening within me that is shaping me and shifting me and building who I am and strengthening who I am, or who I sense I am, inwardly, so that when I'm with you guys, I can be more present. I can listen to what you're asking. I can engage properly. So the breathing is going to be the fulcrum by which we swing from sort of a outer worldly awareness to an inner awareness. Who am I? What's important in my life? And am I adhering to meaning, and all these types of things? What does spirit mean? What does gratitude mean? Blah, blah, blah. So this is the thing. And then after that comes meditation, where you begin to shift your awareness not only to this inner sense of what's happening in my body and sensing thoughts and feelings and emotions, but then having an awareness of awareness. And this is what meditation is: when you are aware that you're aware, and you're not letting objects of the world define you. And the only thing that begins to define you is your awareness. And that becomes subjective awareness rather than objective awareness. So right now, what happens in the world is we define ourselves by objects. What are objects? Anything that has a shape or form. Like, often we think of an object to be like, oh, this phone is an object. But according to yoga, an object can be a photon. It can be air. It can be any of the elements. It's, the people, the animals, the everything. We're all things of the world, made of nature, operating and growing and decaying and stuff like that. And we measure ourselves by our relationship to all these objects. Do you like cats or dogs? I'm a dog person. I'm a cat person. Do you like coffee or tea? I'm a coffee drinker. All of these things are defining identity based on objects. We do that all the time, the clothes we wear, the music we listen to, the computers we use, the phone. Do you use an iPhone or an Android? Oh my God, do you use an Android? How do you even operate that thing? So, all of these are object referral, is what it's called. And now with meditation, rather than measuring ourselves against objects, measuring ourselves against identities that the world has provided us with, the schools you went to, the parents you have, now we begin to measure ourselves based on awareness. And we refer, rather than to objects, we refer to the sense of seeing, of presence. And then as you begin to dwell in this idea of presence, of the seer within, then you, as an individual, begin to express whatever is within you, fully and naturally and spontaneously. And so this is basically the next step in yoga, to fully be yourself and express that spontaneously and naturally, with joy. And then after that are the further steps. But stopping there, this is the level of meditation. And this is an important level, because without this sense, without this connectivity to self-referral, all we're doing is postures. We're just doing headstands and warrior poses. They have a benefit. They definitely have a benefit. But after you're done with your warrior pose, if you go out partying all night and then you go to, abuse people with words, and you're mean, and you're, slaughtering animals unnecessarily and all these types of things, then, where's the yoga in the outward world? It kind of escapes a little bit. So the inward path is where yoga should be moving us. And it's called the path of involution. We talk about evolution of consciousness and expansion and transformation, and all these types of things are used a lot in sort of the yogic circles. But really the most important word for yoga is the path of involution, to move and sense inwardly who is the seer, who is the one inhabiting this body, and how does this presence interact with the world in the best possible ways. So when I teach yoga, and especially with the practices I've been developing, that are all from classical Hatha Yoga texts, or some rare texts, or things that, are not completely in vogue, or pulling from other Indian physical traditions. These are the things that I think about. And I've been thinking about these things for a long time. Well, 20 or 30 years or so. Not a terribly long time, but in regards to the span of my life, it's more than half of my life now. So, so I just really try to apply that with the sensibility of why do we have yoga? We have yoga because of that. We don't have yoga in the world because it's fun to stand on your head, or you're going to get strong from doing a plank. That's not why we have yoga. We have yoga because it's the path of involution, to have a sense, who is the seer, and what is all of this happening. Relaxation is good, but it's not the goal of yoga.
Eddie, I just want to ask you about our today overstimulating world, with all this technique and news and some, I don't know, ringings, calls and something like that. And our nervous system's dysregulation is common. And how do you think, what role yoga can play in large-scale public health to help people manage maybe some public social stress and anxiety? Maybe in the future we can practice some mudras till we sitting in a, I don't know, public spots or something like that, or will it be some apps with mudras or something like that? How we can be present, not only in the yoga class, but in our overstimulating world nowadays?
Okay, so what role can yoga have in helping with nervous system dysregulation, which affects much of the population of the world? And how can simple practices be brought into daily life to benefit people?
Yep.
Okay, very nice question. One of the most important parts of yoga is the idea of self-regulation. It teaches you how to regulate your body, regulate your breathing, then regulate your nervous system, regulate your responses to things that are challenging, and regulate your ability to keep your awareness present. These are all things that occur from yoga. And they're very simple things that can do that. For example, inhaling and counting to 5 and exhaling and counting to 7 is immediate self-regulation. There are circuits in the brain that start in the prefrontal cortex, the executive function area of the brain, that communicate all the way down to the medulla, which is in the brainstem, where all of our survival and life functions are being controlled. Our blood pressure, our respiration, our heart rate, sleep, etc. And so we can send messages from the strategic part of our brain, which is the decision-making part of our brain, to breathe slower. And that will send messages to the area of the brain which is stimulating fight or flight due to hyperarousal, due to all the stressful stimulation that we have. So when we have a stressful thing occur in our lives, which happens all through the day, depending on where you live and what you do, of course, your sympathetic nervous system is going to release stress hormones, which is going to increase your heart rate, increase the blood pressure, send blood to the arms and the legs to prepare you to fight against the situation or flee from the situation. Then when the danger passes, your body comes back to homeostasis. Everything calms back down. So this happens whenever we have a stressful situation that occurs. Now, when we're chronically exposed to stressful situations, what happens is we keep releasing stress hormones, and it gets harder and harder for our body to return to homeostasis. And then, because there are too many stress hormones in the body, we overreact to situations which are not dangerous as though they are dangerous. Phone is ringing. Oh man, I just can't handle another phone call. A text comes in from our boss and we're like, oh man, what does he want now? Not she, because she would never be mean, just a he. So, and so it might be any of those little things like can set us off into catastrophizing. Why? Because we're already in a stress response. Now, if we can begin to manage our stress response every day and shift the baseline response of our nervous system little by little, which is what slow breathing and yoga practices do, then when a stressful situation comes up, we don't get all bent out of shape so quickly. And I don't mean bent out of shape like in a yoga posture. I mean psychologically and mentally and emotionally. Okay, we maintain our center. That takes training. And the best way to do that is when there is not a stressful event happening. So if we do yoga or slow breathing every day, we're training ourselves outside of a crisis situation. Then when a crisis situation comes, our nervous system is more prepared to handle it. We can stay calm. We don't get thrown off. But if we're overstressed, we're over-fatigued from too much work, certainly we're going to respond in the wrong type of a way. So this is dysregulation, and it comes from too much input. Too much coming at us, and our nervous system can't handle it. That's called allostatic load. So what we want to do is train the nervous system to be resilient, flexible, supple, that it can respond to change quickly and not get thrown off. And there's this idea about resilience where we're not just training to be resilient to bounce back to our center, but we're bouncing up each time that we get thrown off. We regulate, and now we bring ourselves to a higher level of being able to manage things that come in. So it's not just that we're resilient and returning back to, zero level, but we're bouncing up instead of bouncing back. And that will give a very sort of healthy approach to managing life. Now, one thing that comes along with that is the recognition of when are things getting to be too much. So it's not just that we want to be able to deal with stress. We also want to navigate it and go, you know what, there's too much going on right now. I need to take a break. I need a breather. I'm going to go outside, or I'm going to go off into the, some area which is not a public space, and I'm going to breathe slowly for a few minutes, and I'm going to, calm myself down or do whatever I need to do. So this is definitely something which is not hard to do. But there needs to be practices done outside of the stress situation, and those are the daily things that we do. Any kind of movement, it could be cardiovascular stuff, it could be yoga, it could be lifting weights, it could be aerobics, it doesn't matter. Movement, super important. But breathing along with the movement, and then some type of a self-regulation technique, which is awareness-based, that you're aware of what you're doing to purposefully slow yourself down in the moment. And that's really what it is. It's really a slowing down in the moment. So I would love for there to be a time when everyone had the tools they need to understand what the stress response is and how they can manage it, and how they can do a slow breathing practice or a mantra practice or a simple yoga posture um, that would bring them calm again in the moment and be so normalized that anyone who sees them doing it doesn't think, oh, what's that person doing standing in the tree in a tree pose in the middle of the office? But it becomes a thing where they go, oh, so and so is standing and if there's Eddie standing in a tree pose, obviously he's trying to refocus himself so that he can enter back into, the workplace in a calm, productive manner or whatever it might be. So I think that there's a couple of things. Number one, there is the training of these things to people so they can use them when they need them. And then another thing is normalization of self-regulation techniques. This is like the key thing. The normalization of self-regulation techniques, whether it's breathing, quiet mantras, saying an affirmation, or doing a yoga pose in public, whatever it might be, let that be as normal as going outside for a cigarette. Let it be as normal as going outside to get a coffee. And I think that day can come. The more people that are practicing these things, the more people will shift towards them. I'm sorry my answers are so ridiculously long, Alexander.
No, I would say that we can cut out the unneeded stuff, but I'm afraid that we're not going to cut out anything really. No, you're just giving the full answers. That's great, actually, to get the context with smaller questions. Yes.
I just want to breathe in slowly, and Eddie,
Yes.
your voice is just like calm up. I'm just
You're the breathing app on Lex.
Yeah,
And actually,
go ahead, Alexander. Go ahead.
Go on. It's all good. It's all good.
I was just going to say, for example, there's a really simple practice where, we can do this also when I come to Cyprus, where you keep your hands on your belly and you breathe in, you pause for a moment and you say, my body is calm. And you breathe out and you pause for a moment and you say, my body is quiet. And you breathe in, your belly rises. My body is calm. You breathe out. My body is quiet. And you do that for 2 minutes and your body gets calm and quiet and your nervous system follows. And it's really simple and really nice. And this was developed by two psychologists who wrote a wonderful book on stress and the human response. It's a textbook. And I learned that practice in their textbook. I use it when I teach, and it's so simple and easy. Anyone could do this in an office, on the subway, in an elevator, in bed at night, anytime. No one needs to know that you're doing it. But if people do know that you're doing it, they might be inspired to do it as well.
I did it once right now. It always works. So 2 minutes can be a deal breaker. Yeah. But I wanted to ask about objects. You talked a lot about objects and how people use them to interpret the world. And actually, we have such an object called numbers. We use numbers for everything nowadays. We want to quantify everything, including wellness. And I actually want to ask you if we can quantify wellness. I'm asking that because on different levels, both on personal, because sometimes a lot of people love their wellness apps, their fitness apps. They love to log in everything, see the results, see the graphs and everything. On organizational levels, for public policy, we need the numbers to say that we need the program. And for office programs as well, we need to see some differences in what we're doing. We can't just do stuff and say it works. We need to quantify it. But it's a good question because, for example, yoga has a deep spiritual history, like way longer than quantifiable history. And it's an open question if we can actually quantify wellness. What do you think?
Yeah, 100% we can. There's a lot of research on yoga, and the research includes physical outcomes like blood pressure, heart rate variability, resting heart rate. It includes things like VO2 max, which is the ability of your red blood cells to carry oxygen to the tissues under pressure, like, for example, exercise. Expiratory flow of your breath, inspiratory flow of your breath. You can measure cortisol levels. You can measure different peptides in the saliva. You can measure through EEG with the electrodes on the skull, brain activity. So all these different things can be measured and therefore quantified. Now, what about emotional things? Definitely. There are all different sorts of self-reported scales where you'll be given a series of 15 questions or 30 questions that will be all have a numeric value. In the past week, how often did you feel that you could control a stressful situation? In the past, week, how often did you feel that you could not control it, blah, blah, blah. And it goes through. Numbers are assigned to those, and depending on your scale, you can see, do you have high stress, low stress, or medium stress? Now, there are other scales as well that are going to measure quality of life. Quality of life is an important indicator of how well you feel about your physical capacities, your mental capacities, your emotional capacities. And then there are scales that are spiritual scales that are going to help measure your relationship with the divine, the relationship with the unknown. Have you ever had transcendental experiences? All of these types of things, and those measurements can be quantified as well. For my master's dissertation, I wrote on, can yoga reduce generalized anxiety disorder and improve a sense of purpose in life? So what I wanted to know was, through doing yoga, can you not only reduce anxiety, but through that reduction, does your meaning and purpose in life also increase? And so there are surveys, meaning questionnaires, validated research questions that have been used in other studies related to purpose in life, meaning of life, and sense of connection to the divine or the transcendent or the unknown. So all of these types of things have been written. You can use them to do research, to study, and you can get a number. You can quantify your well-being score and use that in research. So 100%. And so yeah, and I'm you know, there's certain reasons why you might want to do this. So for someone who feels like, they're in tune with the universe, they're going to say, well, what's the need? I'm good. I
Yeah,
don't need
but
to measure
I was
it.
going to ask you, should you quantify wellness? That's a good
Yeah.
question as well.
So the only reason why you need to quantify things is to convince other people that it's a good idea to do it. Some people, they already believe and they don't need any proof. And some people, they don't believe, but if they're shown the proper truth, then they might try it. They might give it a go. And so that's why numbers are good. Now, where might that be useful? Healthcare, education, like public education, private education, in governments, um, in all sorts of sectors where people are going to experience high stress situations or need support because life is just difficult in general. And so if you want to get people in public education incorporating wellness practices into a curriculum, you're going to need to show them really good evidence that it works based on numbers. I had one study that I published with my friend Dr. Marshall Hagens. This was in 2016, and we compared 40 weeks of yoga, actually 40 classes of yoga, to 40 classes of traditional gym class, physical education, to see if there would be an impact on grade point average. And 40 yoga classes led to a 2.7% rise in grade point average over the gym classes. So simply by twice a week doing some yoga, some simple postures and breathing and relaxation, we help students learn how to focus their attention for time on task in order to complete their assignments, which is the thing which is going to lead to improved grades. Yoga doesn't make you smarter, but what yoga will do is it will take the areas of your brain that are hijacked by stress, make them calm, and allow those areas of the brain to now be ready to do what they're supposed to do, which is be strategic, pay attention, strategize, plan, and learn. So this was a good study and really interesting one. And things like that can be used to convince other schools that yoga in schools might be a really good idea. Why? Because it's going
Oh.
to make grades better.
Mhm. It's
and
What
a
kids
about,
good
have
idea.
yep,
Hmm.
go on.
Sorry, I just want
no.
to mention that it's a really good idea because we speak mostly about adult people, but I never see some classes with I don't know, some childs or some place in a kindergarten when just kids can do a yoga or maybe some kind of yoga. But it's really interesting. How can they also work with it, and why not? It's interesting view.
Who was your youngest yoga student, by the way, Eddie?
I mean, we were teaching simple movement and fun yoga things to nursery school kids, so kids who are 3 and 4 years old.
Wow.
Did it
Yeah,
work out well?
yeah, they do downward facing dog naturally and easily, and they can do relaxation practices and storytelling and all sorts of stuff. When we
Wow.
talk about when we talk about normalizing something, we're talking
Mhm.
about normalizing it not for like my generation. It's probably too late for my generation, but we can normalize things so that these young kids, by the time they get into high school, they get into college, they go into the workforce, this becomes as normal as brushing their teeth. If you want to normalize, you start things young. You don't try to teach old people to change everything that they're doing. That's going to be a little bit harder, but you train kids to have a different philosophy of living, and that's how they'll be when they grow up.
And what about grown-ups? When you roll out, for example, corporate programs, wellness programs, not just yoga, how would you say you should quantify wellness programs, your ROI, that famous word ROI, want to see our return on investment in each and
Yeah.
every program, including wellness. What is your idea on how you should quantify that? Because you have all those studies to say that we need this program, but later on we're going to see something change and we need to measure that. What would you measure to showcase that the program is working or not working, to basically see the progress?
So I don't do any corporate wellness programs. Um, it's not an endeavor that I've ever been involved in or been invited to be involved in. I think that it is a good idea if people who are the bosses and the CEOs and the managers to create environments in working situations that are based on emotional wellness
Mhm.
and respect for energy levels in time, to not be too demanding, but to be good leaders in productivity.
Mhm.
And productivity and creating an environment of healthy productivity might be different than a mindfulness or a wellness program, um, simply because mindfulness doesn't have anything to do with productivity in that kind of environment. Mindfulness has to do with being aware of what's happening in the moment as it's occurring and being non-reactive to it. Now, to be non-reactive to what's happening in the moment isn't necessarily going to increase your sales numbers or whatever the thing is that you need to be doing. So it's possible that practices that are focused on things like relaxation or mindful awareness, et cetera, might not help out with productivity, but might help out with stress levels of the people who are working in your office. So if people are interested in leveraging the output of their workers, then an emotionally balanced and respectful workplace environment will be the best thing for their employees. And that will address their emotional wellness. Physical exercise, very important. Not a lot of people have time for that, but part of that could be making time for, physical activity either before work or after work, probably not during work, is a little bit harder. So those things I would off the top of my head as a non-professional in that world think about. Now, I mean, I have a couple of businesses that I run, and but they're all oriented towards things that are involved with slow breathing and awareness and yoga and stuff like that. But you can run a yoga school or yoga organization and not have consideration for the people who are your teachers or the staff or the folks who are running the place. I mean, if a corporate person comes in and they're like a real, shark-like person, they're going to treat their yoga staff and everyone who works there like they would any other business. They might become very successful, but they might have a high turnover rate of teachers because the teachers aren't being, respected or taken care of. So this happens a lot in the modern yoga world now. So I try to create a kind, thoughtful, flexible environment for the people who are working for me and pay them the best I can so that they can live as yoga teachers and not get paid $35 a class or whatever, like a lot of yoga schools pay them. So you have to be intentional when it comes to how you're running a business. And that intention can only come from the amount of work that you do on yourself. And if you're not doing the work on yourself, then you're not going to be able to translate that into the workplace. If you're not doing some daily practices or some regular practices to enhance your well-being, you cannot translate it into the workplace. You can't bring someone from outside, like me and say, hey, I think this corporate wellness would be a good idea. So all you guys do it, but I'm not going to do it because I got other stuff to do. That's not setting a good example for the people who are in your workplace. So the leader needs to set the example and be a representative of what they're trying to get other people to do. Now that's my supposition. That's my guess. But I've definitely seen that kind of thing happening as well. We had a program in Texas, in Houston, where there's a school district of 215 schools in the Houston Independent School District, and they wanted to put yoga into all those schools. We managed to get yoga programs into 75 of the schools over a 2-year period before the superintendent of that district was replaced, and then they no longer wanted a yoga program. But the woman who's in charge of programming, she was a model for the kind of behaviors that we were teaching. She attended the trainings. She popped into everything we were doing with the teachers. She was present, and the teachers saw that, the leadership in Houston wanted these kinds of practices in their schools and wanted the teachers to know how to teach them as well. So it's with this kind of support that you can really get something embedded into corporate environments, which of course is what a school district is. It's definitely a corporate environment. They're dealing with a massive budget. So anyway, again, Alexander, I'm sorry. Kasi, I'm very sorry. It's an extremely long answer.
No, we love good
No,
stories.
it's okay.
But so,
Yeah, but
these are
just
just to give you an idea that, I've been involved in these types of things and what are some of the outcomes I've seen. And, I have friends who are, one friend of mine who name I won't mention to keep him anonymous, but he was a lead in the development of Google Maps. He was a lead in the development of analytics for Instagram. He did the same for Facebook. He was like, right up there. And he's also a meditation teacher. And I asked him, tell me about this. Not only is he a meditation teacher, he's like an ordained Zen priest. And so this is probably enough information about him for anyone to find him. And so I said, what do you think of like the mindfulness program at Google? Is it working? And he said, no, it's not working because, you can't have a top-down approach to making people or encouraging people to meditate if you're not creating a culture of meditation throughout your entire workplace. Otherwise, it's just another thing being imposed on people. And he said, honestly, not many people were taking part in these programmings, not enough to make a difference. So the programming itself got all sorts of publicity and everyone thought, oh, Google is like, they have mindfulness 2.0 and everyone's meditating at Google and blah, blah, blah. He said the reality of it was, the programs were not really being leveraged and people were not really taking part in them in the way that it would make a substantial difference. Why? Because they had too many demands on them for work output. And there was not a culture created below it of actual mindful awareness. So, personally, I don't know how well these things work.
Sure.
Again,
No problem today.
again, I've never been involved in them, but but I don't have a great idea that they work really well. Guys, just hold on one quick second.
I hope no one got hurt with words, and we can go on.
Good.
I think I have one final question, just one
Okay.
final one. You had lots of impact on yoga research. You have worked with researchers, you have made your own researches, all types of stuff to basically see how yoga works in science world. Have you found any surprising discoveries? Have you had any surprising discoveries to maybe challenge yoga principles, or I don't know, maybe confirm them? Can you share maybe one surprising discovery that you had on your research way into yoga?
Okay, so yes, one surprising thing was that through all of the years of intensive yoga practice of Ashtanga yoga, and this was research just on myself, that it had virtually no benefit for my blood pressure, which tends to go high because of my congenital heart stuff. So I had to find other ways of getting my resting blood pressure down that were not so labor intensive. So one of the first early learnings I had personally was that not all yoga is effective for all conditions. The yoga often pitches itself as being good for everything under the sun. But and this was one of the things that I learned very early on as I was starting to get interested in science, was it's an obvious thing. Okay, not all yoga is created equal, and not all yoga is going to have a beneficial effect for health conditions. You have to pick and choose carefully the types of things you're going to do in order to have positive outcomes. So this was an early learning I had before I knew anything about science. After I knew something about science, the answer would have been, well, of course not all yoga is created equal, and of course you have to choose carefully to get the kind of outcome that you're looking for. So the second thing was to begin to look for those outcomes. Now, one thing also which is true about yoga research is that sometimes, even though the yoga practices might make you feel really good, they might make you feel calm, the physiological measures might not change all that much. You might see only a very moderate change in your blood pressure levels. You might see only a very moderate change in your, cortisol levels, even though you feel really good. So the distance between numbers and how you feel is very important, because from a medical perspective, you might still need to take some medication. But from an emotional perspective, you should keep doing what you're doing because it makes you feel better, and because it gives you some confidence in the agency you have over how you feel. And take medication too. That's not a problem. So, and sometimes you find, for example, with generalized anxiety disorder, there's a researcher named Satbir Khalsa who I was following my research based on earlier research that he had done that showed that cognitive behavioral therapy is the gold standard frontline intervention for generalized anxiety disorder. Yoga is helpful, but it doesn't get as close as cognitive behavioral therapy does. If you combine the two, then you get a really good outcome. So, another important learning is, how does yoga and modern medicine work together for the best possible health outcomes when you have a serious disease, when you don't need to just relax a little, but when you really need to shift something which is occurring within you? That yoga and Western medicine can work hand in hand for really positive outcomes.